Hi, everyone. This is Chapter 2, The Counselor, Person, and Professional, Part 3. This is for Counseling 4500. All right, understanding silence. One of the first things that I'll ask is, are you comfortable with silence? I know some of you all need to have noise or music or something in the background all the time. So, what we're challenging is, when you are sitting and looking at another person one on one, if no one is talking, are you okay with that? Or do you feel like you need to say something so that, there is you're filling in the void of the silence? Because the reason why this is so important is the client might be thinking, the client may be waiting for the therapist to take the lead, or the other way around, which is, you waiting for them or them waiting for you to talk next. Maybe neither people have anything to say at the moment. Observe your body language, their body language. Allow for a moment of calm. So, when you look at them, is it because they're trying to gather their thoughts and that's why they're not talking? And of course, allow for a moment of realization. There's a word called catharsis or cathartic moment, which is basically kind of like that, oh, this is what's going on. So that might be happening with that moment of silence before they reach catharsis. All right. Dealing with the demands of the client or from the client. Some clients will have many demands because sometimes they think that you just work for them and then they can just make you do everything, right? And you need to remember to talk to them about how this is an alliance. This is a working relationship where you both work together, and really it's the client who's doing most of the work because they're the ones who came in for therapy, right? And they want to make these changes, not you. New therapists feel like they need to be as supportive as possible. And sometimes we'll just say yes to everything because we're like, oh my goodness, someone wants us to help them. So you're so excited and everything like that. But really, it isn't. You should not do that. Again, it's a teamwork, right? And they should be doing most of the work when it comes to it. You might be able to offer them ways to achieve those things, right? But still, ultimately, you want the client to do the work. More therapy time, socialize outside of therapy. Sometimes they will do that as well. I've had clients who've asked me, hey, can I be on your socials? And, and like, can we go out and like hang out and stuff? No, unfortunately. And you can say, unfortunately, our policies at our agency is that we're not allowed to be friends on social media with our clients. And I hope that you're able to respect that, something like that if you feel uncomfortable. And usually that's something that your company or your agency will also agree with. So you can use that as a reason behind saying no. Set boundaries at the beginning. So informed consent will usually have this kind of boundary setting disclosure statement so that you don't have to worry about this later on. Dealing with clients who lack commitment. So mandated clients may be very challenging because it requires additional prep work. So mandated client is the key words right there. Those are people who are being forced to go to therapy or get a consequence that might be something that they might not want. So for example, going to prison or going to therapy. Or let's say in students, let's say they're not doing so well in classes, they might be put on probation, and part of probation is to go to therapy, or they get kicked out of the school. Right? So if this is what's happening, they're kind of being forced to go to therapy. And so they probably don't already trust therapy already, right? So it does require additional work where you're like, thank you so much for being here. I know that you had a choice, which is to do this or to that. And you obviously have chosen this, which for me means that you're open to learning a little bit about how you can change some of your let's say behaviors to be much more healthier than the ones that you've been doing so far, right? Or something like that. Start off by talking about the relationship of the therapy and then address the fact that they're mandated to be there. So you want to talk to them and let them know. Don't pretend like they're not mandated. They're mandated, right? And do not promise anything you cannot deliver. Obviously, we cannot ever say that they're going to reach their goals because we don't know. And then, of course, stress confidentiality. And another thing that happens is that people who don't trust therapy is partially because they're like, oh, they're going to tell all their friends or their coworkers or, whoever. They're gossips, right? But really, most therapists are not gossips. So you want to let them know that everything that they tell us within a certain range will be held confidential. And when I say that, that means like if the client says that they are abusing someone, whether it's a child, a person with a disability, an elderly person, or, another person, that you might have to, report it to the police or whatever. So you need to let them know their boundaries so that they know, so that if they don't talk about those things, they will not, let's say, have any type of consequence because of it. All right, tolerating ambiguity. Ambiguity is just a fancy word for we don't really know, right? So tolerating what we don't know because there's no real answer, maybe. Okay, it's kind of like the gray area. And a lot of us want to know the answer, right? But the reality is we don't know the answer to everything. Sometimes it's like, we don't know. That's just how we're going to have to accept it. So tolerating ambiguity is anxiety of not seeing immediate results. Again, like therapy, we don't know if we're going to get through it and reach your goals. We don't know, but let's find out. Some clients may seem to get worse before showing gains. So it might be something like, let's say, if the client wants to stop smoking, they might end up smoking even more cigarettes every day for the first couple of weeks, and then it'll start to maybe hopefully taper off as they go through the therapy. And it also may just all happen at the end and not at the beginning. Okay, now becoming aware of your counter-transference. So that's a really big word, right? If you do not understand yourself, you may become overwhelmed by a client's emotional experience. Let clients go between sessions, be present during therapy, and let the clients know they are responsible for the goals outside of therapy. All right, so let's talk really quickly about the definition of it. Any of our projections that influence the way we perceive or react to a client, it might be an emotional trigger. So here's what all of this is basically saying is, you're going to have a client. Your client might actually remind you of someone in your own life. Let's pretend that the client reminds you of your daughter, right? Because of the way that she's talking. And so suddenly you're talking to your client like you're talking to your daughter, which is not appropriate, but that's what happens because of the way that the triggers that are triggered basically for you during therapy. You think that this is your daughter and you accidentally do that, right? Or you sort of start doing that. You have to be aware of that. And here's another thing. In some therapeutic frameworks, countertransference is fine. It's good. Whereas other therapy frameworks, there's like, no, you cannot do that. It really does depend on the process of working things through. For some, they might be trying to, transference is the other way around, which is when the client says that the therapist looks or reminds them of someone that they know in their life. So let's say your client thinks that you look like or you remind them of their mother, right? So they might start talking to you like you are their mother, right? And so that becomes a thing where for some therapeutic frameworks, it's good because you're working things out. So again, it really does depend, but we want to make sure that you're aware that this can also happen in therapy. Countertransference is when the therapist treats the client like someone in their own lives, in the therapist's own life. Transference is when the client treats the therapist like someone in their life. Okay. Develop a sense of humor. Therapy does not need to be completely serious. Sometimes people use laughter to cover up anxiety, to distract. Sometimes people laugh because it is a welcome relief, because it helps. So again, developing a sense of humor so that we all understand sometimes life is kind of funny in a weird way, in a frustrating way, in a sad way, but it can also be kind of funny, and we can laugh about that. Sharing responsibilities with a client. New therapists might feel that they need to take a full responsibility for the direction and the outcomes of your client. Yeah, because you're like, this is kind of like a project and we're working on it. We need to succeed. We need to get to the end of it, right? But the reality is that it's actually your client's project, and you're just there to help them and guide them with their decision making and the process of going through this. Be careful of clients who give you responsibility in directing their lives. You will meet people who will say, just tell me what to do, right? And I'll just do it. And it's very tempting because it's faster, right? It's more efficient. But what happens is that you're actually creating a codependent relationship where now the client will always go, well, what do I do next? You tell me and then I'll just do it, right? They need to learn how to do and manage their own lives. Collectively design contracts and homework assignments. So with contracts, it would be probably the informed consent, but also when you first start out with the goals, you might have a list and make sure that they are putting in the words and the effort into it as well. And then the homework assignments are basically, that's just a technique where you have your clients do certain types of work when you're not in therapy so that they're working on it still. All right, declining to give advice. So this is something that's very, very hard to do when you're new because a lot of your friends probably told you that you would probably make a really good therapist because you know how to give me really good advice or whatever, right? Or you know, just know exactly what to say. Well, that's a friend or a loved one. When you are a therapist, you're not supposed to just give out advice. Therapists can help the client discover their own solutions and recognize their own freedom to act. Avoid making your clients dependent on you, like we said before. Defining your role as a counselor, depending on your theoretical framework, you may have various roles. You are there to help the client recognize their own strengths, discover what is preventing them from using their own resources, and clarify what kind of life that they want to live. So sometimes they don't know exactly what it is, right? But as we explore, as they're able to now bring out the stuff that they feel inside, outside, and explore and talk about it and work on it, they'll get to know themselves a lot better as well. Invite clients to look honestly at their behavior and make them make certain decisions about how they want to modify the quality of their life. Learning to use techniques appropriately. Techniques should evolve from the relationship and the materials presented. So you're going to learn about a bunch of these different therapeutic frameworks, right? We want to make sure that you're using them in the right way because you need to know the basis why these techniques were created and how they were intended to be used. Sometimes we'll just read something like, oh yeah, I know exactly, but you really don't know the history of it. And so we would like you to know those things so that you can form your own theoretical framework. Know the rationale, which is basically a fancy word for the reasoning behind it, for each of the techniques that you use. Are they appropriate for the goals? Have thoughtfully chosen techniques, not just a hit or miss, which is kind of like more guessing, like, oh, let's try this instead. Let's try this instead. No, as you become a professional, as you go through your studies and stuff like that, you'll go, oh, okay, I should use this on this specific type of behavior that we're trying to work on. Developing your own counseling style. Do not necessarily copy your supervisor's style. Think about how your teachers, your supervisors, your therapists influence you, but stay yourself. And that's really good advice. So here's one of my pieces of advice. When I was doing an internship, I was working under 3 therapists. Okay. So I had to learn the kind of like the nuances of each of those therapists. And then I would actually write my case notes like them for each of those people. And there are certain things that I liked from each of them. So I started to pick and choose what I liked, and then I started to develop my own style, right? So that's something that we're talking about here. And then this can only happen as you do more and more when it comes to practicing and then doing your internship. Is to develop and get to know how you are, how does your theories, your philosophy in life work when it comes into a counseling situation. Maintaining your vitality as a persona and as a professional. You are the most important instrument in therapy. How do you take care of yourself? That's so important. I hope that you have a little bit of fun, a little bit of responsibilities, a little bit of everything. Okay. We want to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. We hear a lot of people say, oh yeah, we need some self-care. But what they end up doing is just binge watching Netflix, right? That's not necessarily taking care of you. Sometimes that's actually just procrastinating. So it's definitely, we want to make sure that you're taking care and enriching your own life. We worry about people who have experienced professional burnout, which is like, I'm so tired of this now. I don't even want to do this anymore. You are something that we hope will become a professional for the rest of your life. So you can help as many people as possible in your life, right? So for you to be able to do that, we don't want you to burn out. Stressful events will happen. It's how you cope with these stressors that are so much more important. You should not give and give without getting anything in return. You really do need to learn how to love and respect yourself and appreciate yourself, and then say thank you when people give you compliments. Don't say, oh no, it's not true, or no, just thank them and say thank you so much for saying those compliments. It made me feel good, right? We want to make sure that you're able to receive as well. Self-care is not optional, it is a requirement. All right, that ends chapter 2.